Hi, everyone. Ron Crider here. It's April the 18th. It's a Saturday. Here I am in the kitchen. It's a different kitchen than I'm usually in, but I always like to sit near a kitchen. Now, that's kind of strange that we have mountains here in Florida. Well, you figure that one out at another time, and we'll talk about that.
I'm Kevin Bakko, and I'm in Houston, even though this doesn't really look like Houston. That's where I'm at right now, and we're here to just give our individual thoughts apolitically about the COVID-19 virus, and in particular, the coming out party, shall we say.
Kevin and I have worked together for like 25 years, off and on, and we have very strong opinions about certain things, which we are not going to discuss with you today, but we are all very much news junkies. So I'm not going to say that we're experts at anything we're saying today. We're just like you guys sitting around chatting about where we are right now, because who would have believed we would be here on March the 1st today? Right, Kevin?
Absolutely. Neither Ron or I are doctors, medical professionals, haven't played them on TV, but I do stay at Holiday Inns on a regular basis. So that gives me some level of expertise in, well, something.
No, you're a pretty smart guy. And if it comes to sports, you've forgotten more about sports than I'm ever going to know. And if you get a little closer to your microphone, it would even sound better. So let's start off right now and talk about, when do you think this is going to peak? When do you think we're going to reach the top of the plateau and we can start sliding down the other side?
Well, again, neither of us are medical professionals, so this is simply a layman's guess on my part. But I think we're seeing the peak of the plateau. Things seem to be slowing down.
Are you speaking for Houston? Are you speaking for the nation?
I'm speaking in general for the nation.
Okay.
We've had a slowing down of the number of overall cases being reported. We've had a slowing down of the number of deaths involved. And we're seeing a tremendous rise in the percentage of people who are being reported as having gotten past all of this and went from being tested negative to positive. Obviously, all of this is going to be circumspect to the individual states involved. New York, state of New York, state of New Jersey, who knows? I don't know. I don't know that they're at their peaks yet. On the other hand, you've got places like North Dakota, Montana, who barely saw a blip in the first place, and now they're seeing virtually nothing new taking place. So it all depends on population. It depends upon proximity. I think at the end of the day, just from looking at it from a 50,000 foot level, from my perspective as a layman, I think we're nearing the peak of the plateau, and we should start heading down the other side of the roller coaster here pretty quick.
Well, it's my opinion that we're not quite there yet. I still think that we've got another 10 to 12 days before we will really peak out and begin to slide down. In other words, right around the first of the month seems to me like where we are. And the only reason I say that, and I have no experience in knowing this, all the smart people don't necessarily have any experience. Yeah, this has only happened, last time this happened was in 1917. It was a totally different time. But I do believe we're not quite there yet. At least that's my opinion. So we won't dwell on that. Agreeable people can agree to disagree. So let's move ahead and say, who's in control? The state or the national government?
Yes.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the bottom line comes down to the fact that states have the ability, the power, the authority to dictate virtually every aspect of this issue. But from a federal level, we're still under a federal emergency declaration. That does give the president certain authority in certain circumstances, in certain areas. And effectively, we're still working under the War Powers Act. There's only one person who's in charge of the issues surrounding that. At the end of the day, the bottom line comes down to everybody's going to have to just suck it up, and they're going to have to accept responsibility for the things they can and let go of the perception of responsibility for the things that they can't. I think in many respects, early last week, this all came to a head. and you saw both sides just unmercifully clashing. But by the end of the week, we have a situation where all the governors have been told, you're in charge. Here are the guidelines set out by the Fed, okay? The Fed still has the CDC. The Fed still has the task force on coronavirus. You are probably not going to find a single governor who is going to look at something coming out of the CDC, coming out of the task force, and saying, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to do what I want. They're going to be cautious because at the end of the day, nobody wants somebody to say they jumped too quickly.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I pretty much believe that the states will make up their own minds, but they will probably generally follow the government guidelines. Let's move on to restaurants, bars, and socialized seating. How's that all going to work out?
Well, nobody wants to sit next to me anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. But at
You want to sit next to me because I always pick up the tab, you see.
Well, there are things that benefit all sides. No, at the end of the day, very fortunately, a great number of restaurants have been able to keep things moving forward with takeout. My wife and I, Saturday nights, we have literally gone from what was a multi-year routine for Saturday nights, and it is support our local restaurant night. As a quick example, last week we decided we wanted barbecued ribs. So I ordered them online, said I'm going to pick them up at 6 o'clock. There were literally, at a minimum, 24 cars in that parking lot waiting for the servers to bring them the meals out to the car that had been ordered. You have a lot of restaurants, obviously they have to be good restaurants, that people want to see stay open and they want to patronize them in order to keep them moving in that direction. When various governors in various states at various times start saying, okay, we're going to take the handcuffs off of the restaurants. If they want to open up, they can open up. If you want to go, you can go. Obviously, you're going to err on the side of caution when you feel the necessity to do so. From my perspective, you're going to see people returning to the restaurants, not in the numbers that they normally do, but you're going to have, as an example, let's just take for example, a restaurant that seats 100 people. Saturday night, they might be seating 90 people at any one time. My perspective is they're going to be seating somewhere in the area of 30 to 35. But people are still going to be maintaining that mindset that I've got to make sure that my favorite restaurant is still open when I'm ready to go. So I'm going to be placing those takeout orders as I have been. Between the two, I think we're going to see an uptick in the sales and production for these restaurants. And the good restaurants are going to survive this. The chain restaurants certainly are going to make out without any real problem. It's the mom and pops. It's that local diner on the corner. It's the little restaurant that you enjoy that's in the middle of the strip center. Things like that. You know, those are the ones that, from my perspective, from my wife's perspective, we have to help those people maintain their business acumen. And so we do the takeout with them on Saturday nights. Every once in a while, it'll be a Tuesday or a Thursday. We'll order delivery. But at the end of the day, if you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, nothing has to change that you don't want to change. If you're going to throw up your hands and say, you know, I'm not getting takeout, I'm not getting delivery, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to sit on my hands. If your favorite restaurant goes under, that's on you. If you give it your best shot and you help them out, you know, cross your fingers, they'll be here tomorrow.
I hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, some of these small restaurants may never get open again because they really only have cash flow that'll last them through about 23 days. That's the national average. See, I'm the guy that watches TV all the time, and I just sort of compile all the stuff I've seen. But 23 days of cash flow, and if they can't make their rent and they can't pay their electricity and their telephone and all that sort of thing, they could be in trouble. Now, there's a thing in a lot of these contracts called force majeure. We're not going to get into a legal discussion about it. That may apply, which means that maybe they don't have to pay because this was sort of an act of God, or however the force majeure clause comes into effect. And they might let them off the hook. But this is a very, very bad time for the restaurant business. And they're the third largest employer in the United States, the restaurant industry, the food service industry.
With relatively few exceptions. The strip centers, the shopping malls, the portions of the main street that these restaurants and bars are on, they're typically owned by well-to-do individuals and companies. Problem believing that all of these guys are going to sit there and say, hey, wait a minute, it's April 11th or April 17th. No, it's the 18th. Your rent was due on the 1st. I'm throwing you out. I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of people who are going to do anything other than say, look, I know what happened. It's not your fault. I'm going to work with you. Yeah. Are we going to have a few that just, they're looking for an excuse to be I'm going to put my own little bleep in there. Yes, there will be those, but I think they're going to be few and far between. I think we all accept the fact that we're in this together. You know, this thing doesn't pick out anybody based on wealth, poverty, skin color, age, gender. You know, everybody, every aspect of every demographic you can think of has had this virus affect them. Some in larger quantities, some in smaller, but everybody is susceptible. And I have maybe it's just because I'm such a good-hearted soul myself. I have a problem believing that you're going to have a whole lot of restaurants that are shuttered because they weren't paying rent. Now, that being said, you've got other factors involved. You know, if they've been using a local supplier that they haven't had the opportunity to pay, that others haven't had the opportunity to pay, it's a small supplier. That supplier may go out of business, which in turn domino affects the restaurants. But at the end of the day, I think if we're all just willing to accept the fact that we're in this together and we'll all work with each other where we can with respect to the things that have an effect, I think we'll be fine.
Okay, let's move on to sporting events, social spacing, players, fans, vendors. What's going to happen there?
You know, the nice thing is we've seen a number of major league team owners, you know, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball. NFL hasn't gotten into the mix yet. Mark Cuban's a perfect example. Mark Cuban is making sure that the vendors are still seeing an income, even though there's nobody in that arena to sell hot dogs and Cokes to. They're making sure that the people who work in those arenas to keep the arena ready to go for a game, in a game that hasn't been played in 6 weeks at this point, that they're still getting paid. I think those people, yeah, they're struggling. You know, Mark Cuban's not making sure that their mortgage payment's paid, but he's making sure that they've got some kind of income. Between that, the stimulus, other things, you know, you knock on wood, you hope everybody's going to be okay in that respect. When somebody rings the bell and says, okay, it is now phase X, and so we're going to open the stadium, okay? You're going to have a tough time getting people comfortable with flocking into that stadium or flocking into that arena and sitting virtually within inches of complete strangers, as we have done for a century and more. I think when we get to a point where these arenas can be opened up, you're going to have families in the stand of the players, the executives. You're going to have the advertisers who are spending a small fortune to make sure that they're providing financial support to the teams. You're going to have those kinds of people who are in there, and they will be distanced, okay? you're going to have a few people in this row, in this section, and the next section, they're going to be 3 or 4 rows up or down from the people in the first one.
Do you think they're going to limit? You think they'll limit the number of people that can get into a stadium and set it up for total social spacing?
Here's the thing: the great majority of stadiums and arenas are owned by a municipality, state government, state, county, city, whatever. The states, the cities, the counties, they're going to be real reluctant to say, okay, anybody who wants to come in, knock yourself out, buy a ticket, and come on in. I think what you're going to see is a situation where ticket sales are based on computers, and they can do this easily. And I won't go into the details of how, but you take every season ticket holder and you say, look, you don't have a season ticket this year, but you get to be in the mix for the first game. And the computer then selects out, okay, I need 4 tickets for this group. Okay, those are going to be the first 4 tickets in row 1 in section A. The next one is going to be, he needs 6 tickets. Okay, you're going to have 6 tickets in the middle of row 3 of section A. Mm-hmm. And the guy who needs 2 tickets, he's going to have the last 2 seats in section A, 2 more rows up. That's how they can do that. Will they do that? Is that part of the mix that they're thinking of? Do they have another game plan? Can't tell you. But I know from my experience in this type of exercise that from a computer perspective, a ticket master or somebody like that can do that. Have they started thinking along those lines? Who knows? If I was in charge of Ticketmaster, I'd have been thinking about that a long time ago, at least a month ago, because it isn't going to just be snap your fingers and, put 50,000 people in the stadium.
Kevin, they're talking about opening up Arizona for the baseball guys, or Arizona and Florida, and then have them play in stadiums that there aren't any people there because they can get some of the TV rights and some of the TV money back. Well, if everybody subscribes to that theory, there's going to be a lot of games being played at the same time. It's going to be pretty much all sports all the time on TV.
Here's the thing. They're literally talking about, we're all familiar with the term doubleheader in baseball. For baseball, in the conversations they're having that you've just brought up, they're talking about having triple headers, okay? The biggest problem that a lot of people, myself included, have with baseball, have with basketball, whatever. When you've got 162 games that you're playing in order to come up with 2 teams that are going to play in the World Series, you didn't need that many in the first place, okay? Truncate the season. You're not going to get 162 games in. And playing 162 games isn't going to do anything for your revenue, because at the end of the day, people will watch that first game. They're all going to tune in for that first game. They'll hang around for the second game. You can't get enough when you haven't had any. By the 7th, 8th, 10th, 15th, 27th, 35th game, people are going to say, okay, clearly I can turn on the TV and watch baseball at any point in time. I've got other things to do. I think they're hurting themselves if they try to go in that route. You do it. You put all the American League teams in Arizona. You put all the National League teams in Florida. You have these complex areas where there are multiple baseball fields that they use for practice. Everybody has a game this week. You're going to play these 2 teams, these 2 teams, these 2 teams, and then they're going to play a doubleheader. And everybody's going to play this week. But if you try to have so many games that in order to satisfy the local markets, you're literally televising a dozen games at one time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, that being said, NFL does it all the time. But you're getting 1 game a week for your team. It doesn't matter how many games are being shown today. If you're the type of person like myself who is going to watch a specific football team, I know that at 6 o'clock I can turn on the game and that's my game. But in baseball, are you going to watch the 9 a.m. game and then you're going to watch the 3 o'clock game and then you're going to watch the 7 o'clock game and then do the same thing tomorrow? No, it's not going to happen. They're going to find out real quickly that the first week or two, let's face it, everything is up for grabs. Everybody is going to want to do everything they possibly can that they haven't been able to before. But once that newness wears off, once people get back into, it's not just going to be the baseball games and the basketball games and hockey. We're going to be able to go back to the office. We're going to be able to go to our favorite restaurants. We're going to be able to go and do things with our family. Baseball isn't going to dominate the world.
You got it. Okay, well, I know I could talk sports with you all day, and we don't have all day to do this video. So let's talk about testing. How many tests can we do? How fast can we do them? Because
as long as there's no math involved, I'm good.
As my understanding, again, as the news junkie, that the biggest problem we have going on right now is testing, because we need a lot more tests. We don't have the equipment to do the tests. And I also further understand that the problem with doing this testing is there's another part of the equation. It's not just the testing kits, but it's verifying when they send it off to get the results. There's another piece of equipment or another chemical that's required, and that's in short supply as well. So they say, well, maybe we could do 1 million a week. Well, 1 million a week, we're not going to do all 325 million people in the United States. Of course not. But we probably would like to do half of those people in the United States or something like that. That's a long time.
Here's the thing, Ron. At no point in our history, when we have faced these types of issues, 1917 being the last big one, but I mean, swine flu, let's just take swine flu for an example. 600,000 people came down with the swine flu in the first year. But were you ever told to go take a test just to find out whether or not you had it? No. We have a culture now, and you can have a great debate over who's responsible for it, but the culture right now is you have a section of people who they don't want anything to open until everything has been tested. They don't want to open until there is a vaccine.
Well, that's a long time away.
It isn't going to happen. There are viruses that you never find a vaccine for, okay? AIDS came up in the 80s. There is no vaccine for AIDS now. You know, you've had muscular dystrophy, you've had leukemia, you've had multiple sclerosis, and so on and so forth. You don't have vaccines for those things. The mindset of the people who are so focused on, I've got to have a vaccine, I have to be guaranteed protection. Get yourself a shovel, dig a little hole, sit down inside it, and pull the dirt over the top of you, because you're going to have just as much of an effect on guaranteeing that there will be a vaccine. Everybody wants one. Here's the thing. Everybody wants one from the perspective of, can my company make money off of it? If you don't think every pharmaceutical company in the world is trying to come up with a vaccine for this so that they can patent it, it's got their brand on it, nobody else can play with it, and they can go out and charge whatever they want for it, then you're kidding yourself, because it's happening. But it happens with everything out there. It has been happening from day one with AIDS, with multiple sclerosis, with, you know, I don't care whether you're talking about a virus, you're talking about a genetic problem, and I'm going to be right up front. I can't tell you that muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis, whether that's a virus, it's a genetic thing, whatever. I'm using those as merely examples. You don't have the ability to protect yourself from everything unless you just want to lock yourself in a box. And I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
We did it for polio. We did it for smallpox.
And guess what? We got lucky. We got lucky. It was the right thing at the right time. Let's be frank. We lived in a time where you had a simpler mindset. The President of the United States had polio. The President of the United States was somebody who everybody adored, everybody thought was greatest thing since chocolate cake. And the circumstances were such that they were able to find a vaccine for polio. But here's the problem. We've gotten to a point now where you have a third of the population that doesn't want to have their kids vaccinated.
Oh, that's a
or
really
get those, or get the, you know, I'm sorry.
Even if you have the vaccine, they're going to say, sorry, I'm not going to have my kids tested because we don't believe in vaccines. This is a really big deal. You've seen that happen in New York.
Well, this is the funny thing about all of this. It will be interesting to see how, when all of this settles in, how many of those people say, okay, fine, stick little Johnny in the arm. Let's just not take any chances, because they've gone through this. They've seen what happens here and now with this. They saw what happened to their neighbor. They saw what happened to the person they worked with. They saw this happen to their favorite sports figure. All of a sudden, vaccines are going to be very, very popular from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. 97.2% through 99.7% of the people who get this virus survive it just fine. The higher number has to do with the older people. The lower number has to do the lower number has to do with the older people. The higher number has to do with the younger people. But it is very survivable. You don't ever want to get on a ventilator because you only have like a 10 or 15% chance of surviving the ventilator. Even though everybody talks about ventilators, it is not the answer to everything.
No, in fact, in certain circumstances, they found that the ventilator contributed to the problem, and they got them off the ventilators, fortunately. But here's the thing. You have so many people who it's been recognized that you had the virus. You don't have it anymore. You never showed a single symptom. You have a lot of that out there. And this is where we get into that whole issue of, nobody can go back to work until everybody's been tested, or, you've got to carry papers now that say you've been tested and you've been shown to be negative. You're not going to test 330 million people. It is not going to happen.
No, you're right about
that.
What
you have to do is you take a segment of society. You say, okay, if you're over 65, you have to have a test. If for no other reason than to make sure that you're okay. If you have this type of medical condition, or you have been specifically identified by your physicians previously as having a compromised immune system, then you have to have a test. But there is no way in the world 330 million people are going to be standing in line to get a test. It is not going to happen.
Good point. Okay, let's talk about masking, the new universal uniform. I sent you a picture which we were going to try to put up, and we haven't been able to figure out how to do that. But it was a picture of the ice skating rink, I believe, in Japan, when they had the ice skating championships recently. I believe it was the beginning of March. And when the camera would go on to the crowd, everybody in the crowd in Japan had a mask on. It was like we were watching it on TV. This is back. It was like very early March or late February. And we were sitting here kind of saying, can you believe that? They're all wearing masks. I can't believe that. Is that going to be the new universal uniform?
Here's the thing. Here's why it's not going to happen. Okay. And this, again, my own personal opinion. This is my Holiday Inn experience. They made a tremendous mistake when they made a point of saying you need to wear a mask it's not going to help you, but it will help you prevent others from getting it. I was in Walmart a couple of hours ago. My wife let me out of detention. And 90% of the people in that store did not have a mask on. What you have told people by doing that, but it's not going to protect you. You're helping to protect others. People are saying, fine, I'm staying 6 feet away. So if it's not going to help me, why should I wear it? And that's just the way it's going to be.
I'll tell you a little story, and I mean no disrespect to this because we had it the other day on the radio. It's a really good friend of ours by the name of Herb Boyd. Herb is a professor at New York University, and he grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and he lives in Harlem. And when I was speaking to him on the phone the other day, I said, so Herb, what you been doing? You've been hunkered down? Oh yeah, Ron, we've been hanging out, but my wife and I went for a walk today. And I said, well, that's great. Where'd you go? Oh, did you wear your mask? And he says, Ron, I live in Harlem. I'm a black guy. The last thing we're going to do is wear a mask. He says, there's a problem with this. You talk about being racist. Here's a black guy with a mask on walking up the street. He says, we don't wear a lot of masks.
Well, at the end of the day, the bottom line is going to come down to, it's a matter of social understanding and acceptance. If I can do something that's going to ensure that or at least work towards somebody else not getting something that I don't know that, I could be asymptomatic, I could have it, and because I'm not wearing a mask, I could pass it along. I'm doing the 6 foot thing. It's real easy for me to figure out. Okay.
Yeah, because you're 6'9".
Yeah, well, and so at the end of the day, even if I'm close to them, I'm still far enough away from them. But here's the thing: are you a sensitive enough person? Are you a person who is empathetic to the needs and the welfare of others? If you are, you'll wear a mask. If you're not, well, I'm glad you're staying 6 feet away, because as you may have noticed throughout this video, I touch my face. Okay. Whether it's a skin condition, whatever, just simply a bad habit. We had all these people screaming up and down, you can't touch your face, you can't touch your face, you can't touch your face. I'm going to touch my face. That's who I am. I'm not going to sit there in agony because my nose is itching. I'm going to scratch it. But at the same time, if I'm in a room with people, I'm going to wear a mask, and it's not for me, it's for them. If you can have that kind of mindset, great. If you don't, why don't you work on 10 feet instead?
So here's the next thing. Vaccination certificates for everyone. Now, it's my opinion that at least at the moment, as soon as we come up with plenty of people that are getting tested, I think anybody that comes into this country is going to have to show a vaccination certificate showing at least that they something relevant to this COVID-19 thing.
Well, until there is a vaccination, there can't be a certificate.
But there can be a certificate that said you have been tested.
And here's the thing. You and I both know this is a tremendously slippery slope.
Oh, it'll be racist too,
Well, no, all you have to do is say, black, white, brown, green, yellow, doesn't matter. You've got to have this little piece of paper. They tried that about 70 years ago, and it didn't go over real well. And here's the thing. You can always start these things in something that is altruistic. Okay, we're doing this to make sure that everybody is safe, everybody's protected, blah, 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 blah. The problem becomes, at what point are your freedoms impinged upon because you don't have that little piece of paper with you today? Now, it used to be, and quite frankly, I wish it would go back to, you can't enroll your kids in elementary school until you bring in a vaccination record. Mm-hmm. Now, I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But for the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there isn't going to be a vaccine for COVID-19. And what happens when COVID-20? There is no such thing as an end to these things. What we have to do is we have to recognize this is part of, and I hate the term, our new normal. Our new normal indicates that we have a susceptibility to things that started on the other side of this planet. You know, we no longer live in a society where, you know, if it doesn't happen within 50 miles of where you live, it doesn't affect you. It does, you know. And at the end of the day, we have a new normal. But that new normal has to recognize the fact that you have rights as an individual. Let's just use a religion as an example. Freedom of religion, that's in the First Amendment, the very First Amendment. You and I both know there are certain religions that they want nothing to do with doctors, modern medicines. You know, you can't even give them blood if they're lying on the operating table having been hit by a car. Their family says, no, he can't have blood, and if it means he dies, he dies. You have to respect that. If, based on religion, you're not going to allow yourself or your family to be vaccinated, does that mean that the government should be taking away the rights of you and your family because you didn't want to do something that went against your religion? It's a slippery slope. And
I hear you.
And both sides can make their argument, okay? And, you know, we talked about this. We're keeping this as apolitical as possible. But at the end of the day, both sides have a valid argument. What we have to recognize is there comes a point where you have to say, you know what? We're just going to have to agree to disagree, and you move on.
Okay, we'll leave it there. I have a little bit of good news. This is kind of next to the last topic to talk about. I saw this on TV this morning. It looked pretty good to me. It's a UV light cleaning system, and they expect to have it at doors, on cars, on buses, on airplanes. And it's my understanding that when you walk through this thing, stand there for 2 or 3 seconds and it pretty much cleanses you. Now that sounds like a magic bullet, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it than what I just said, but the UV light is certainly used in hospital rooms and sterilization processes and so forth. So it's conceivable that something like this could take place, right?
I'm going to tell you right now, A, it will. B, it will take off. For every downside we have ever faced as a nation, we have figured out a way to create an upside. Okay, here's a perfect example. One of my local grocery stores, it's a Randall's. In your area, it might be a Tom Thumb, whatever. For the first time, they literally have a full-time cleaning crew. I mean, there are, and they all wear this special T-shirt that says, you know, we're part of the cleaning crew. You go in, you grab a wipe so you can wipe off. You know, I have mobility issues, so I'll use a scooter now and again. They come right over, they take the wipe from you, they throw it away for you. If there's an issue, you know, they'll come take care of it. But they're constantly cleaning. This did not happen beforehand. So for all the people who unfortunately are out of work, you've got a whole bunch of people who probably never had a job before who have a job now. And it's now considered a very viable job. Absolutely. I've seen this going on throughout various parts of history. We face a downside to something, and somewhere along the line, somebody will come up with an upside. The UV lights, that's been a known, that's been a given in hospital environments and areas. If you've got a lab that's working on various viruses, so on and so forth, a controlled lab, there are UV lights everywhere, okay? But it's more than that. One of the local grocery stores to me, it's a Randall's, same chain as perhaps in your area. It's Tom Thumb. In some areas, it's Safeway. They now employ a full-time staff of people during the day, during their hours of operation, that do absolutely nothing but clean as you go. Somebody touches something on the counters, they wipe it off. I have mobility issues, so I'll use a scooter now and again. I took a wipe to wipe down the handle of the scooter that I was using yesterday, and one of these people just came right over and said, "I'll take care of that. I'll throw it away for you." For every negative, there's going to be a positive. We may find that this virus and the circumstances surrounding it, we talked about this before with every pharmaceutical company out there working on a vaccine. We're going to find a number of cottage industries springing up that will create a whole new industry for things that are associated with dealing with this kind of problem, because this is not going to be the last problem we have. There will be a COVID-20, there will be a COVID-21. We'll call it something else down the road, but there will always be something. This has been dramatic enough that people have said, I want to make sure, as negative as this sounds, I want to make sure I can take advantage of the next one.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, so we're at the very end of this video, and the question is, where do we go from here? Now, the reason we did this is we kind of want to go back and look at this in another 10, 15, 20 days. We're not really sure when we can back and review it and say, well, how right were we about this? And this is what we thought today on April the 18th, Saturday. Look what happened on the end of April, the beginning of May, something like that. So that was one of the reasons we decided to put this together. So where do you see us going after today? What's going to happen now?
I'll tell you right now, half the states will be open as a result of phase one. Half of them will be, another 20-25% are going to be right on the edge of moving toward opening for phase one.
Phasing in like a little bit, opening.
Well, you have phase one, phase two, and phase three. By the time we get to the end of this month, from my perspective, I see half the states in phase one. They'll have been able to demonstrate they have had 14 days of decline. They'll be able to meet the other benchmarks involved. At the end of April, half the states are going to be open. By the middle of May, from my perspective, you're going to see another 20-25%. Places like New York, it may be the 1st of June, from my perspective. And here's the thing. I hope I'm wrong. It happens rarely, but I hope I'm wrong. I'd like to see a lot of things moving more quickly than they're projected to, but at the same time, I know full well that we have to do this safely. But there's a difference between being safe and being paranoid. And as long as it's safe and not paranoid, I'm good with whatever decisions are made.
So here's another really big problem, and then we'll finish on this note, and that is the economic impact of this country. The longer we stay shut down is huge. Now, we all understand that life is more important than money, but it gets to a point after a while, you just can't stay shut down for 6 months. We all know that. That's the biggest issue that's going on right now in Washington and around the country. We want to get open right away. We got to get everybody back to work. Or, no, it's too fast. So there's going to be this huge tug of war, and none of us know what's really right until we see more testing and get more testing out there. And that's why I think it's going to be later rather than sooner. That's my opinion.
We shall see.
All righty. Well, it's Ron Crider here in Vero Beach. If you like this video, please give us a like. Send us a comment. Click on there and tell us what you think of the video. We'll be doing another one whether you like it or not. That's perfectly okay. You don't have to watch it if you don't want to watch it. And Kevin will be with us. Kevin, say goodbye.
Goodbye, Kevin.